All my life I devoted myself to raising my son, and when I fell ill, he threw me away like something useless. No need to waste money on an old man, he told his wife. After the stroke, I ended up in a nursing home, costing 24,000 pesos a month. My son thought of me as a destitute old man and didn't show up for half a year. But when the bank director came personally to tell me about 30 million pesos on deposit, everything changed. My son rushed in with apologies and plans for my money, but I made a decision he did not expect. 73 years, is that a lot or a little? Depends on how you count. If you count the days lived, it's more than 26,000. If you count the wisdom accumulated, sometimes it feels as if life was wasted. And if you count the pain of betrayal by the closest person, then even a single day can feel like eternity. My name is Ramon Alvarez Moreno. I worked all my life as an accountant at the Believer Textile Factory. The factory has long been shut down, most of my colleagues are already gone, and yet I'm still here. I was here until the stroke struck. That February day began as usual. I woke at 6 in the morning, a habit from youth, when I had to be at the factory by 7. I did my exercises, took a shower, had breakfast, cornmeal porridge with raisins. My wife Esperanza, may she rest in peace, always said that cornmeal porridge was the key to long life. She died 15 years ago from cancer, but I still eat the porridge every morning, a memory of her. After breakfast, I sat at the table and spread out the newspapers, El Universo, El Comercio, and the local district paper. I read slowly, sipping coffee from an old ceramic cup. That cup was a wedding gift from my father. "Drink coffee from good dishes, son," he used to say. "That's our way." I remember reading an article about pension increases. The journalist wrote that pensioners should rejoice over a 300 peso raise. I wanted to protest. You can't even buy bread for that now. But then everything started to spin before my eyes. At first I thought it was just dizziness. Maybe I stood up too quickly. My blood pressure surged. But then the world tilted sideways, the letters in the newspaper blurred, and my right hand couldn't hold the cup anymore. It fell, shattered, hot coffee spilling over the table. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't obey. I wanted to call for help, but only incoherent sounds came out of my mouth. A wave of fear gripped me, a primal animal fear, worse than anything I had felt even in the war. Back in '52, during the civil unrest, at least I understood what was happening. But now my own body was betraying me. I collapsed from the chair onto the floor. I lay there trying to call my neighbor, Carmen. She lived just across the wall, and sometimes we knocked to each other, a signal that all was well. But my arms didn't move, my voice was gone. I don't know how long I lay there. Time lost all meaning. Then I heard the lock turning. It was Dolores, the woman who came once a week to clean the apartment. I had given her the keys 3 years earlier, when I realized I could no longer manage the household alone. "Don Ramon!" she screamed when she saw me on the floor. "What happened?" After that, everything was like a fog. The ambulance came, the doctors spoke quickly to one another, gave injections, lifted me onto a stretcher. I remember only the white ceiling of the hospital corridor flashing above me, and the thought, is this it? Is this the end? I spent a week in intensive care. The doctors fought for my life, while I fought against the desire to let go and follow Esperanza. It was unbearable. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. They fed me through a tube. The nurses were professional but cold. They did their job, nothing more. I saw Diego in the hospital only on the 4th day. My son arrived after work, tired, irritated. He was 38, a sales manager in a trading company. He earned well enough, but always complained about the lack of money. "Dad," he said, sitting beside my bed, "the doctors say you're getting better. That's good." But he hesitated. "But they also said you need constant care. Do you understand what that means?" I understood. And what scared me was not the illness, but what I saw in my son's eyes. There was no love, no compassion, not even pity, only annoyance. Annoyance that I had become a problem. "Valentina is pregnant," Diego went on, avoiding my eyes. "She needs peace and quiet. And with you understand, we won't be able to give you the proper care. Maybe it's better to find a special place, a nursing home, or something like that." I tried to say something, but only garbled sounds came out. Diego pretended not to understand, though I knew perfectly well he could. In these past days, I had learned to pronounce simple words more or less clearly. Don't worry, Dad. We'll find a good place. There'll be professional nurses, doctors, everything for your health. At home, you'll only be in the way, especially when the baby's born. In the way, my own son said his father would be in the way. I closed my eyes and turned to the wall. Diego sat for another 10 minutes, talking about work, about the apartment renovation, about the prices of baby things. Then he stood up and said, "All right, Dad, I have to go. Tomorrow I'll come back and bring the paperwork. Don't worry, everything will be fine." After he left, I cried. For the first time in many years, I cried like a child, not from the pain in my body, but from the pain in my soul. That night in the hospital ward, I couldn't sleep. I lay there remembering how I had raised Diego. After Esperanza's death, he became the meaning of my life. He was 8 when his mother died. It was a hard time, for him and for me. I worked 2 jobs to provide him with everything he needed. Mornings at the factory, evenings doing accounting in a local store. I came home late, exhausted, but I always found time to talk with Diego, check his homework, read him a book. I remember when he was 9 and came down with pneumonia. For 2 weeks, I never left his bedside. I took unpaid leave, sat with him, spoon-fed him, read him fairy tales. The doctors said he recovered so quickly only because of my care. At school, Diego did well. Not a straight A student, but not failing either. He stayed in the safe middle. After classes, he went to a modeling club, fascinated by little airplanes. He dreamed of becoming a pilot or an aircraft designer. I encouraged his interests, bought him books on aviation, took him to museums. When my son turned 16, I decided it was time for a serious talk. Life is life. A teenager is no longer a child. Diego, I told him then, soon you'll be an adult. I want you to understand the most important thing. In life, what matters isn't money, but relationships between people. Be honest, be kind, help those who are weaker than you. I understand, Dad, he answered, but I could see he was only half listening. At that age, all teenagers are like that. Parental lectures just fly past their ears. He entered university to study economics, not because he was drawn to it, but because the admission threshold there was lower. He studied moderately, but he graduated. Then came military service. He served in the suburbs in the Signal Corps. He came back more mature, more serious. He found work quickly. Those were times when economists were needed everywhere. At first in a small firm, then in a trading company. His salary grew, and so did his ambitions. At 28, he married Valentina. A pretty girl but spoiled. Her parents were well off. She was used to the good life. Diego must have thought he could give her that. After the wedding, my son started visiting less often. At first once a week, then once every 2 weeks, then only on holidays. He said he was too busy at work, that he didn't have enough time. Valentina never came. Work, friends, headaches, always something. When my grandson was born, I was overjoyed. I thought that now the family would grow closer, that we would see each other more. But it turned out the opposite. Diego began using the baby as an excuse. He couldn't leave Valentina alone. The child was fussy. A grandmother was needed. I saw my grandson maybe 3 times in his first year of life. A beautiful boy, so much like Diego in childhood. I wanted to spoil him, buy him toys, tell him stories. But Valentina thought that a grandfather could teach the child something wrong. What exactly wrong I could pass on to a 1-year-old, she never explained. Little by little, our meetings became rarer. We spoke on the phone, but briefly. Diego was always in a hurry, always busy, and I was growing old and loneliness was becoming heavier to bear. And now, lying in a hospital bed after a stroke, I realized, for my son, I had become a burden. Not a father who had given him life and raised him, but a problem that needed solving. The next day, Diego really did come with documents, a thick folder, printouts from the internet, phone numbers of different institutions. It was clear he had prepared thoroughly. Dad, I've looked into it, Diego said, spreading papers on the bedside table. There are several options. Private nursing homes are expensive, but the conditions are good. Government-run ones are cheaper, but the waiting list is long, and there's an intermediate option. semi-state institutions. I listened and understood. This was about my future, about where I would spend the rest of my years, months, or days. Here, he pointed at a photo, a private residence, golden autumn, excellent conditions, individual care, dietary meals, but it costs 40,000 pesos a month. 40,000 pesos. My pension was 22,000 pesos. Where would the rest come from? Diego earned well, but 40,000 was still a serious sum. And this one, he showed another paper, the nursing home Quiet Harbor, a public-private partnership. The conditions are simpler but acceptable. Costs 24,000 pesos a month. 24,000. That was practically my entire pension, but clearly that was the maximum I could hope for. I think Quiet Harbor is the best option, Diego continued. Not elite, but not a slum either. And the difference between your pension and the cost, I'll cover. How generous. My son was ready to contribute 2,000 pesos a month for his father, less than the price of a good bottle of wine. Diego, I said slowly, syllable by syllable. At home, possible. At home is impossible, Dad. I already explained. Valentina is pregnant. She needs rest. And we can't provide you with professional care. In the home, there are nurses, doctors, everything necessary. He spoke firmly, almost aggressively. Clearly, he had already made the final decision and did not want to hear objections. Besides, he added, it's temporary. Until you recover, until you learn to walk and speak again, then we'll see. A lie. We both knew it was a lie. At my age, after such a stroke, full recovery was nearly impossible, which meant Quiet Harbor would become my final home. I've already started the paperwork, Diego said. Tomorrow or the day after, everything will be ready. As soon as the doctors allow discharge, we'll transfer you there immediately. I closed my eyes. I had no strength to argue, and it was useless anyway. The decision had been made without me. All that remained was to accept it. After Diego left, Nurse Isabel came over. A woman around 50, she had worked in the hospital more than 20 years. She had seen everything. Don Ramon, she said quietly, don't be upset. I know that Quiet Harbor. Not a luxury place, of course, but not the worst either. The main thing is to focus on treatment and recovery. Isabel, I whispered, is it bad there? She hesitated, choosing her words. It depends. Depends on the people and on how the patients themselves approach it. If you fight, if you try, you can live there with dignity. But in her eyes, I read pity, which meant she knew things about Quiet Harbor that were not good. That night I dreamed of Esperanza, young, beautiful, just as I remembered her on our wedding day. She stood beside my bed, shaking her head sadly. Ramon, what have you done with our son? Where is the love? Where is the gratitude? I tried, Esperanza, I answered in the dream. I put my whole soul into him. You gave your soul, but you didn't teach his heart to be human. I woke with a feeling of guilt and bitterness. Perhaps I really had done something wrong in raising him, spoiled him too much, or too strict, failed to explain something important. They discharged me from the hospital 3 weeks later. My speech had become clearer. I had regained some feeling in my right hand, and I could stand with support. The doctor said that for my age, recovery was going fairly well. Diego arrived in the morning with a car and driver. He helped pack my things. There weren't many, mostly clothes and medicines. He suggested leaving my books in the hospital. What do you need them for? He said. Reading is hard, your eyes get tired, they'll just take up space. I insisted on taking at least 2 of my favorites, 100 Years of Solitude and a collection of Neruda's poems. Diego shook his head but agreed. We drove in silence. I looked out the window at familiar places, realizing I might be seeing them for the last time. There was my neighborhood, the house where I had lived 40 years, the store where I bought groceries, the bench in the square where I liked to sit in the evenings. The nursing home, Quiet Harbor, was located on the outskirts of the city in an old 4-story building. Once, this place had been a children's sanatorium, later a boarding school for troubled teens. Now old people came here to live out their days. The building looked bleak, gray walls, peeling paint, cloudy windows. The grounds outside were tidy. Apparently, the residents themselves maintained order. A small garden, benches, walkways. The administrator, A woman of about 45, plump with a tired face, met us in the lobby. Rosario, as she introduced herself, spoke businesslike, without unnecessary emotion. Ramon will live in a 4-bed room on the second floor. The roommates are calm. They cause no trouble. Meals 3 times a day, medicines prescribed by the doctor, visits at any time, but no later than 8 in the evening. She showed us the room. 4 beds, 4 nightstands, a shared wardrobe. Everything old but clean. By the window sat a thin old man reading a newspaper. 2 other beds were empty. Their occupants were at treatments. "This is Emilio," the administrator introduced. "Former math teacher. You'll be roommates." Emilio raised his head and nodded. In his eyes was the same sorrow as in mine. Diego helped arrange my things in the nightstand, hung my clothes in the wardrobe. He did it quickly, without talking, in a hurry to leave. "Well, Dad," he said when everything was ready, "get settled. If you need anything, call me. I'll come. When I can." He hugged me formally, kissed my cheek, and left. I was alone now, in a strange place, among strangers, with the understanding that my former life was over. The first days were the hardest. The daily routine was strict. Wake up at 7, breakfast at 8, lunch at 1, dinner at 6. Between meals, treatments, walks, rest time. The food was simple, without frills, porridge on water, soup from concentrate, rice with chicken. But they didn't let us go hungry. The staff worked conscientiously, but without heart. They did their jobs, and that was all. My roommates turned out to be quiet men. Emilio, the former math teacher, spent most of his time reading or solving problems. His legs had stopped working after a stroke 2 years earlier. Eduardo, a retired military officer, suffered from memory lapses. He could talk for hours about the war and then forget his own name. Rodrigo, a former engineer, was simply fading away quietly. He spoke little, mostly gazed out the window. All 3 were here for the same reason. Their relatives couldn't, or didn't want to, take care of them. Some had been brought by children, others by social services. The common thread among all of them was the feeling of being unwanted. I tried to find my place in this new life. The doctor, an elderly man working part-time, said I had to commit to rehabilitation, daily physical therapy, massages, walks. Physical therapy was led by a young woman named Paloma. She was a professional but tired of the monotony. She had a group of 10 old people and demonstrated the exercises mechanically, not really believing in the results. Massage was done by another woman, Conchita, about 60 years old. She worked roughly but effectively, spoke little, but knew her craft. The hardest thing wasn't the physical condition, but the emotional one, the feeling of abandonment, of being useless. Diego didn't call, didn't come. I had no other visitors. Some residents had relatives who brought packages, walked with them around the grounds. But I sat alone, realizing that for my son, I was already dead. A month later, a new worker appeared at the nursing home. A young orderly named Angela. She was about 25, studying part-time at medical school and working here to make a living. Angela was different from the rest of the staff. She didn't just perform her duties. She treated the residents with genuine care. She helped us wash, get dressed, eat, and while doing so, she talked, joked, encouraged. "Don Ramon," she said once, helping me up from bed, "were you handsome when you were young? I bet all the girls ran after you." "Maybe so," I managed to say with effort. "And did you have a wife?" "I did. Esperanza. She died." "That's sad, but I suppose you loved each other?" I nodded. Angela smiled. "That's good. Then your life hasn't been lived in vain." Simple words, but they warmed my soul. It had been a long time since anyone showed interest in my life, my feelings. Gradually, trust grew between us. Angela told me about herself. Her parents had died early. She had no relatives. She lived alone in a rented room. Her salary was small, but enough for bread. She dreamed of becoming a doctor, of helping people. "You know," Angela said one day while changing my bed linen, "I don't understand how people can abandon their parents. My mother died when I was 17. I would give anything to have her by my side. But here people treat their living parents like a burden." It's the times, I said. The times have nothing to do with it. Conscience is the same in any era. I liked our conversations. Angela was an intelligent young woman, well-read, curious about life. With her, one could talk not only about illnesses and medicines. Gradually, my speech was improving. The doctor said it was a good sign. That meant the brain damage hadn't been too severe. Angela rejoiced at every one of my little successes. "See," she said, "your body is fighting. It means it's too early to give up." But the most important thing was that she treated me like a human being, not like a decrepit patient. She cared about my opinion, shared her plans, asked for advice. "Don Ramon," she asked one evening, "what do you regret most in life?" I thought for a long while. That I raised my son wrong. "What did you do wrong?" "I didn't teach him how to love." Angela grew thoughtful. "Maybe he just doesn't understand. Sometimes people don't realize what's most important until they lose it." "Maybe, but I didn't believe Diego would ever understand. To him, I was already lost. With Angela, for the first time in years, I felt needed. She asked my advice when she chose advanced training courses. She told me about her problems at work. She shared her dreams for the future. "I want to open my own clinic," she confided. "A small one, but where every patient would be treated like family." "You'll succeed," I told her. "You have a good heart." "A good heart is nice, but money is needed too. And where can I get it on my salary?" Yes, money. That was when I remembered my deposit. One evening I was lying awake, unable to sleep. My roommates were snoring, and I was thinking about life, about what would happen next, and suddenly I remembered the money. The thing was, I had been saving my whole life. From youth, I was used to living frugally, spending only on what was necessary. Esperanza sometimes scolded me. "Ramon, we're not beggars. We can allow ourselves a little treat." But the habit of saving was stronger. Peso by peso, year by year, especially after my wife's death, when I was left alone. My pension was small, but I spent even less. Food, utilities, medicines, that was all. No entertainment, no travel. I wore my clothes until they fell apart. On top of that, when the factory closed, I received a decent severance package. I also sold a plot of land that I had inherited from my parents. It turned out to be in a prestigious area, and it fetched a high price. By the time I was 70, I had saved a very respectable sum, 15 million pesos. And 4 years ago, I decided to put the money in the bank. I went to Capital Invest, a solid bank with a good reputation. The manager offered a 5-year deposit at a good rate. "Don Ramon," he said, "this is a very profitable offer. The rate is high, plus interest capitalization. By the end of the term, the sum will increase several times over." I didn't really understand all the financial details then. What mattered was that the bank was reliable. The money would be safe. I signed the contract, received a deposit certificate, and now, lying in the nursing home, I remembered. The deposit was due to mature this year, and with the interest and capitalization, the sum should be impressive. I asked Angela to bring my documents from the nightstand. Among them, I found the deposit certificate. I read slowly, taking in every line. The initial amount, 15 million pesos. That was all my life savings. The rate, 12% annual interest with capitalization. The term, 5 years. I had never been a mathematician, but I figured with compound interest, by the end of the term, it should be somewhere around 30 million pesos. For me, with a pension of 22,000, it was cosmic money. But the most interesting part was in the fine print. It turned out the bank offered special conditions for large depositors. If the deposit exceeded 10 million pesos, an additional bonus rate applied, another 2% annually. I read and reread, hardly believing my eyes. It turned out my deposit qualified for these special conditions. In fact, the effective rate was 14% annually with capitalization. "Angela," I called the girl, "what is it, Don Ramon? Help me calculate." I showed her the certificate and explained the situation. Angela was studying medicine, but she knew math well. She took a calculator and began to work. "Don Ramon," she said when she finished, "this comes out to a very large amount." "How much?" "If I understand these terms correctly, about 30 million pesos. I almost choked. 30 million pesos. For a man of my background, this was simply unimaginable. Are you sure? I checked several times. Yes, by my calculations, it should be around that. 30 million pesos. And here I was, finishing the remains of soup in a nursing home because my son thought of me as a penniless old man. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay awake thinking what to do with this knowledge. Tell Diego? But then he would rush over, start taking care of me, transfer me to an elite clinic, and I would never know whether he loved me or just my money. No, I decided. Better to stay silent. For now, I would wait and see. Maybe my son would come to his senses, realize he had done wrong. Or maybe I would find a better use for that money. Another 2 months passed. Diego never appeared. He didn't call. Apparently, he thought the problem with his father had been solved once and for all. Meanwhile, I was slowly recovering. My speech was almost normal, just a little slow. I could walk with a cane, though not very far. Most importantly, my mind was clear. Angela rejoiced at my progress. She had become like a daughter to me, caring, attentive, sincere. Sometimes, after her shift, she would linger, sit by me, tell me about her life. Don Ramon, she would say, you are so wise. Talking with you is a joy. I'm sorry I never had a grandfather. I think he would have been like you. Simple words, but they warmed my soul. And I knew she spoke sincerely, not out of pity. And then one autumn day, something happened that changed everything. A distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit arrived at the nursing home. The administrator fussed around him like a hen. Ramon Alvarez Moreno, the man addressed me. Osvaldo Martinez, director of Capital Invest Bank. May we speak privately? We went to a small room for meeting relatives. The director took out a leather folder and opened it. Don Ramon, congratulations. The term of your deposit expired 3 days ago. The amount payable is 30,200,000 pesos. Even knowing the approximate figure, I was stunned. 30 million pesos. Given the size of your deposit, the bank is prepared to offer you VIP client status, the director continued. A personal manager, special conditions, investment consultations. Thank you, I said slowly. I need to think. Of course, but don't delay. Money shouldn't just sit idle. After he left, the news spread instantly throughout the nursing home. Suddenly, the administration began treating me obsequiously. The staff smiled ingratiatingly. The other residents looked at me with envy and hope, as if maybe the rich neighbor might help them. Only Angela stayed the same. In fact, she became a little distant. What's wrong? I asked her. Nothing, Don Ramon. Just, now you're a rich man, and I'm only a simple nurse. It feels awkward. Nonsense. Money hasn't changed me. You're still the dearest person to me in this place. She smiled, but I could see. She felt uncomfortable, and I understood her. Yesterday, we had just been an old man and a young woman who had become friends. Today, I was a millionaire, and she was an underpaid worker. But I already had a plan that would change everything. The news of my fortune reached Diego faster than I expected. Apparently, someone from the staff had called him, or maybe the administration informed him. Who knows? He arrived the same day, burst into the room, flustered, out of breath. Dad, what's going on? I got a call. They said the bank director came to see you? He did, I answered calmly. And what did he want? He told me my deposit had matured. What deposit? What deposit are you talking about? I slowly, with pauses, told the whole story, about how I had saved money all my life, about how 4 years ago I put it in the bank, about how there were now 30 million pesos on the account. Diego listened with his mouth open. I could see on his face how his expression changed, from disbelief to shock, from shock to greed. 30 million pesos? He repeated. 30 million pesos. My God, Dad, you're a millionaire, a rich man. And I thought what? Well, that you only had your pension. That's why I brought you here. If I had known about the money, then what? I'd have put you in the best clinic in the capital. We'd have hired the best doctors, nurses. Dad, now we can afford anything. He was already saying we. The money hadn't even been received yet, but my son was already counting it as his. And where were you all these months, I asked. Working, Dad. You know, business. Things to do. But now everything will change. Tomorrow we'll transfer you to an elite clinic. And if there had been no money? Diego hesitated. Well, we'd have figured something out. Over time. A lie, a blatant lie, and we both knew it. At that moment, Angela came into the room with my medicine. Seeing a visitor, she wanted to leave right away. Wait, I stopped her. Diego, this is Angela. She's been caring for me all these months. Angela, this is my son. Diego gave the girl a cold nod. His thoughts were elsewhere. Dad, let's seriously talk about the money. It needs to be managed properly. I can help find a good financial advisor. Don't rush, I said. I have an idea. What idea? I will leave all my inheritance to Angela. A dead silence fell. Diego turned pale as if struck. What? What did you say? I said that Angela will inherit everything. Dad, you've gone mad. I'm your son, your only heir. You can't give everything to a stranger. I can, and I will. Angela blushed. Don Ramon, what are you saying? I can't accept your money. You can and you will. Diego jumped up, pacing the room. This is madness. Dad, she's just a nurse. She earns pennies. Do you think she takes care of you out of love? She's just doing her job. For which she earns 15,000 pesos a month, I replied calmly. And how much do you spend in a restaurant in one evening? What's a restaurant got to do with it? We're talking about inheritance, about millions. Exactly, about millions of pesos that will go to a person with a pure heart. Pure heart? She just got lucky, latching onto a rich old man. Then Angela broke in. Enough, she said sharply. Don Ramon, I refuse any money, and you, she turned to Diego, ought to be ashamed to speak like that about your own father. And she ran out of the room. Diego and I were left face to face. He sat down on a chair, breathing heavily. Dad, he said more quietly, I understand you're hurt. Maybe I was wrong to bring you here, but let's talk calmly. Let's talk, I agreed. All right, this girl is kind. She helps you, takes care of you. But why give her everything? Give her 1 million, 2, 5, as thanks, but not everything. Why not everything? Because I'm your son, your blood, I must inherit. Must? And what have you done to deserve it? What do you mean? I'm your son. That's not an achievement. That's an accident. Diego clutched his head. Dad, but I'll make it right. I'll come every day. I'll move you to the best clinic. I'll be the most caring son. For money? No, not for money. Out of love. And where was that love these 6 months? He was silent. What could he answer? Diego, I went on, do you want to know why Angela will get the money? I do. In 6 months, she has never once asked me for money, never complained about her salary. She just did her job with heart. But she was getting paid. 15,000 pesos for 30 old people. That's 500 pesos per person per month. Diego frowned, calculating. And you, I continued, how much have you spent on me in 6 months? I paid for the nursing home. 2,000 pesos a month. 2 for your own father. But I have a family, expenses. Angela also has expenses, but she still finds time to sit with me in the evenings. Just like that, out of kindness. Diego stood, walked to the window. Dad, I understand now. I was a bad son, but give me a chance to make it right. A chance? You had a chance every single day for half a year. Where were you when I was scared and lonely? Working. And Angela wasn't working? She studied part-time, worked double shifts, rented her own room. Yet she still found time for the old people. He turned to me. All right, I was a scoundrel, I admit it. But why should she get everything and I nothing? Not nothing. You'll get the most important thing. What? A lesson that in life the most important thing isn't money, but human relationships. Diego sank onto a chair. What lesson, Dad? You're depriving me of my inheritance. I'm not depriving you. You deprived yourself. The day you brought your sick father to the cheapest nursing home. He stayed silent, realizing there was no point in arguing. Tomorrow I'm going to the notary, I said. I'll make it official. I'll contest the will in court. Go ahead, just remember, I'm of sound mind, and the medical certificates confirm it. Diego stood and walked to the door. You'll regret this, Dad. When you're left all alone, you'll remember my words. I was already alone for half a year, and look, I survived. He slammed the door and left. I was alone again, but I felt calm. The decision was made, and I had no regrets. The next day, I truly did go to the notary. Angela found out and tried to dissuade me. Don Ramon, I can't accept your money, it's not right. Why not right? Because I was just doing my job. You don't get millions for that. Your job, I repeated. And who paid you to sit with me in the evenings? To listen to my problems? No one, but I enjoyed being with you. There you go. You did more than your job required, out of the goodness of your heart. But still, such money. Angela, I said seriously, you yourself said you want to open a clinic. To help people. Here's your chance. She hesitated. And your son? My son made his choice. Now it's my turn to make mine. At the notary's office, the paperwork took 2 hours. The notary, an experienced elderly woman, asked me several times if I was sure about my decision. Don Ramon, she said, a will can be changed at any time, but relatives may contest it in court. Let them try, I replied. I have medical certificates proving I'm of sound mind. And the motives for your will? For the kindness and care shown during my illness. The notary wrote it down, sealed the documents. Angela Castillo officially became my heir. On the way back, Angela was silent. I could see she was troubled. What are you thinking about? I asked. About how my life will change. And I'm afraid I might change too. You won't. You have a good heart. And if I do, if money makes me different, then you'll be no better than Diego. But I believe that won't happen. She took my hand. Don Ramon, I promise, I'll spend this money on good deeds. I'll open a clinic for the elderly, so they won't feel abandoned. That's good. Then my money will serve a purpose. At the nursing home, the news of the will was received differently. The administration became even more obsequious. The residents looked at Angela with envy. They too wished for a wealthy benefactor. The staff was divided. Some envied her, others thought she deserved it. And then a week later, something unexpected happened. Diego returned. He didn't come alone, but with his wife and child. Valentina, for the first time, set foot in the nursing home. She held in her arms their year-old son, my grandson, whom I had seen only a few times. Dad, Diego said, we've come to ask for forgiveness. Valentina stood beside him with a forced smile. It was obvious she found being here unpleasant. Don Ramon, she said in a false voice, we realize we were wrong. We want to make things right. The child was crying, not recognizing his grandfather. Valentina rocked him, shushing him. What do you want to make right? I asked. We'll take you home with us, Diego said. We'll set up a room for you, hire a nurse. You'll live as you should. And the will? The will. Well, that's your right, but we want you to know. We've changed. We've realized that family is more important than money. Lies. The same false tone as his wife's. All right, I said. Let's test that. Test it? How? Diego asked, surprised. The will remains in force. Angela will receive the inheritance, and you will take me into your home and care for me purely out of love. Their faces dropped. But Dad, Diego began, we're family. Exactly, and family must love selflessly. Valentina murmured quietly to her husband. Diego, maybe we should go. It's stuffy here. Go, I agreed, and don't come back with such proposals again. They left, having achieved nothing, and I finally understood. My son loved only money, not his father. A month later, the deposit was fully credited to my account, 30,200,000 pesos, a sum that opened every possibility. The first thing I did was transfer to a private clinic, Golden Years, an elite institution with excellent conditions, a private room, quality meals, professional medical care. But most importantly, I persuaded the administration to hire Angela. I offered them such a salary that they couldn't refuse. At first, the girl resisted, saying she didn't want to take advantage of my position. You're not taking advantage, I convinced her. You're just working where you're valued. In the new clinic, it was as if I came back to life. Good doctors, modern equipment, attentive staff. My speech fully recovered, my movements grew surer. I no longer felt like a dying old man, but like someone who still had time ahead. Angela too blossomed in the new environment. Her professional skills were recognized properly. Soon she was promoted to head nurse of the ward. And then she found love. A young doctor, Alejandro, a neurologist, fell in love with her at first sight. Learning her story, he treated her with even greater respect. Don Ramon, he once told me, I've never met anyone as genuine as Angela. People like her are rare nowadays. Cherish her, I replied. She's one of a kind. They had a modest wedding, but I was the guest of honor. I felt like a happy grandfather, invited to the celebration of a beloved granddaughter. 30 million pesos. It's an enormous responsibility. Angela understood that better than I did. She enrolled in financial literacy courses, studied the basics of investing, read books on philanthropy. Don Ramon, she told me, I've lived all my life on pennies, and now I'll receive such a sum. I'm afraid to make a mistake, to waste it wrongly. You won't, I assured her. Your priorities are right. And indeed, her plans were noble. To open a medical center for low-income pensioners, to create a foundation for lonely elderly, to build a modern nursing home where people could live with dignity. You know, she dreamed aloud, I want our nursing home not to have the sadness of Quiet Harbor. I want people not to feel abandoned. A library, a concert hall, workshops for crafts. A wonderful idea, I encouraged her. Something like a community for the elderly? Exactly, where each person could find something meaningful, where the atmosphere was like family, not a hospital. I loved her plans. I knew the money had fallen into the right hands. Meanwhile, Diego didn't stop trying to regain his father's favor. Once a month, he came to the clinic, brought fruit, asked about my health, but inevitably, the conversation turned to the will. Dad, he said, I've realized my mistakes. Truly realized. Maybe you'll give me a chance to make things right? I give you a chance every day, I answered. You can come, talk, be a son, but the money stays with Angela. But why? Why should a stranger get what rightfully belongs to the family? Because that stranger turned out to be closer than my own son. Those words hurt him, but they were the truth. In the year I spent with Angela, I received more warmth and care than in the last 10 years with my son. Another year passed. My health was relatively stable, though the doctors warned me, at my age, things could change quickly. I needed to start making final decisions. Diego continued visiting me, and little by little I began to notice changes in his behavior. He became more attentive, more patient. He told me about his work, his family, asked about my affairs. He stopped bringing up money every time. More than that, he started helping around the clinic. He came on weekends, talked with other residents, brought books and magazines. I saw that some of the old folks were genuinely happy to see him. I like coming here, he once said. The people here are wise, experienced. Each has their own story. Before, you weren't interested in that. Before, I was a fool, thought only about work and money. But it turns out there are more important things. I studied his face carefully, trying to understand. Was he just playing a part, or was he sincere? Diego, I said, let's suppose I change the will. What would you do with the money? He thought for a while. Honestly, first I'd provide for my family, buy a good apartment, pay for my son's education. Then, you know, Dad, I'd like to do something useful. Maybe set up a charity foundation to help the elderly. Sounds like Angela's plans. Yes, I've heard about her ideas. They're good. Maybe we could work together. That was unexpected. Diego suggesting cooperation with the woman who was supposed to receive his inheritance. And if I don't change the will, then I'll keep coming to see you because you're my father and I love you, even if I realized it too late. There was no falsehood in his voice. Still, I decided to give him one last test. All right, I said. Tomorrow I'll go to the notary. I'll restore your inheritance rights. Diego's face lit up with joy. Really, Dad? You'll forgive me? I will, on one condition. What condition? You'll work here as a volunteer for 6 months, without pay, helping the old folks, talking with them, caring for them. Diego frowned. 6 months, but I have a job. You can refuse. Then the will stays as it is. He was silent for a long time, wrestling with himself. I could see the inner struggle between his desire for money and his unwillingness to sacrifice comfort. All right, he said at last. I agree. I'll quit my job and help here for 6 months. Then it's settled. The next day I really did go to the notary, but not to change the will, only to add one important clause. Diego kept his word. He quit his job and began coming to the clinic every day. At first it was clear he struggled. Accustomed to office work, he had trouble adapting to the new duties. He helped the elderly wash, dress, eat, took those who could still walk out for strolls, read books to those with poor eyesight, played dominoes, chess, told jokes. The first weeks were hard on him. He wrinkled his nose at the smells, barely tolerated the whims of sick old people, grew weary of the monotony. But little by little, he got into the rhythm. Dad, he told me, I never imagined it would be this hard, physically and emotionally. Now you understand what Angela does every day. Yes, I do, and I marvel at how she keeps her optimism. At first, Angela treated Diego with suspicion, but when she saw that he was truly making an effort, she gradually softened. She even began helping him, explaining the peculiarities of caring for each patient. Your son is changing, she told me once. He's becoming kinder, more patient. See? And you didn't believe people could change. Maybe they really can, if you give them a chance. By the end of the second month, Diego was working more confidently. He had favorite residents he could spend hours talking to. Don Emilio told him war stories. Doña Dolores taught him to play the guitar. Eduardo solved math problems with him. You know, Dad, Diego said one evening, for the first time in my life, I feel that my work really matters to people. That's a good feeling, I agreed. In the office, I was selling things people didn't really need, for money. But here I'm giving something that truly matters. Attention, care, companionship. And how does that feel? I don't know how to explain it. You come home tired, but your soul feels light. You feel the day wasn't wasted. In the fourth month, something happened that finally convinced me of Diego's genuine change. One of the patients, Don Sergio, was near death. His relatives hadn't visited in a long time. Diego volunteered to stay with him at night. For 3 nights in a row, my son sat by the dying old man's bed. He gave him water, adjusted his pillow, read prayers. When Sergio died, Diego wept as though he had lost a family member. He was so wise, my son said through tears. He told me about the war, about his wife, about his children, and yet he died all alone. Not alone, I corrected him. You were there. Yes, but it's not the same. Where were his children, his grandchildren? Why did no one come to see him off? Maybe they were like you a year ago. Diego shuddered. Was I really so heartless? You were. And how can you forgive me? Because I see you've changed. 6 months passed quickly. Diego transformed from an awkward volunteer into a true helper. The patients loved him. The staff respected him. Even Angela admitted he had become an indispensable member of the team. On the last day of his trial, I invited my son and Angela into my room for a serious conversation. Diego, I said, you've fulfilled the condition. 6 months as a volunteer. Now you can go back to your old life. What if I don't want to go back? He replied unexpectedly. You don't want to? Dad, these 6 months have changed me. I realized I want to dedicate my life to helping people. I've already applied for social work courses. And the money? The will? Diego was silent for a moment. You know, Dad, to be honest, at first I agreed to volunteer only for the money. I thought, I'll endure 6 months, then live like a rich man. And now I see that Angela deserves the inheritance more than I do. She has devoted her life to caring for people, and I'm only learning. Angela looked at him in surprise. Diego, what are you saying? The truth. Don Ramon was right to leave the money to you. You'll help thousands of people. And me, I probably would have just spent it all on myself. But you've changed. Yes, I've changed, but earning forgiveness and earning an inheritance are 2 different things. Forgiveness I may have earned. The inheritance, not yet. I was astonished at the maturity of his words. A year ago, Diego demanded money as if it were his right. Now he admitted honestly that he wasn't ready for such responsibility. All right, I said. Then I have a proposal. I told them about the new version of the will, which I had quietly arranged a month earlier. The main share, 20 million pesos, would still go to Angela. But 10 million pesos I left to Diego, on the condition that he spend them on charity. You'll open a foundation to help the elderly, I explained to my son. You'll help people like the patients here. Diego was stunned. Dad, this is too generous. Not generous, fair. You proved you can change. Now prove you can do good. Angela agreed with the new will. This is the right decision, Don Ramon. Together we can do more than alone. So you'll cooperate? Absolutely, Diego nodded. We share the same goals. The following months were filled with preparation. Angela and Diego worked together on plans for future projects. She focused on the medical side, creating a modern clinic for the elderly. He studied the basics of social work and philanthropy. They often came to me for advice, told me about their ideas, asked my opinion. I gladly watched as warm, friendly ties grew between them. Don Ramon, said Angela, your son has truly changed. Now I understand what he was like as a child. Kind, responsive. Yes, I agreed. Life spoiled him, but it's never too late to change. Diego, too, changed his attitude toward Angela. No longer seeing her as a rival for inheritance, he came to see her as an ally and a friend. Dad, he said one day, I want to apologize to Angela for what I said about her a year ago. I was a scoundrel. Apologize to her, not to me. And he did. Angela accepted his apology with understanding. We all sometimes say the wrong things. The important part is being able to admit the mistake. I began to have new plans. Since my son and my heiress had become friends, perhaps it was time to do something more. What if we create a single foundation, I suggested, instead of two separate projects? Angela and Diego exchanged glances. And how would it work, she asked. Simple. Angela handles the medical side, Diego the social side. Together you solve the organizational matters. I like that idea, Diego said. A united foundation will be more effective. I like it too, Angela agreed. The main thing is to clearly divide responsibilities. And so the idea for the charity foundation Wise Years was born. I suggested the name in memory of all the old people fate had brought into my life. My health was slowly declining. The doctors warned me there wasn't much time left. But I wasn't upset. The main task of my life had been fulfilled. My son had become a man. Diego now came every day, not out of duty, but by his own choice. We talked for hours about everything, about life, about the foundation's plans, about my grandson. Dad, he told me once, I want my son to grow up differently, to understand the value of family from childhood. Then you must set the example. I will. I've already started. Every weekend I bring him here to the clinic. Let him see how important it is to care for the elderly. My grandson, little Ramonito, really did come to the clinic often. The child wasn't afraid of old people. On the contrary, he reached out to them. The patients adored him, played with him, told him stories. He's growing into a good boy, I told my son. I'll try not to spoil him the way I was spoiled. No one spoiled you. You spoiled yourself chasing an easy life. I know that now, and I won't make that mistake again. Meanwhile, Angela married Alejandro. The wedding was quiet but heartfelt. I blessed the young couple, wished them happiness. Don Ramon, Angela said after the ceremony, you are like a father to me. Thank you for everything. No, thank you for giving me back my faith and kindness. The newlyweds settled in a small apartment near the clinic. Angela continued her work and prepared for the inheritance. Alejandro supported her plans and himself intended to engage in charity. The Wise Years Foundation began its work while I was still alive. Diego made everything official. Angela developed medical programs. The first project was the reconstruction of Quiet Harbor, that very nursing home where I had spent half a year. I wanted to become a good place, I explained, so that other old people won't suffer as I did. We'll make it happen, Dad, Diego promised. We'll turn Quiet Harbor into a model institution. The stroke came suddenly. Again a February morning, again breakfast alone. Only this time, not in the old apartment, but in the private room of the clinic. I was reading letters from Quiet Harbor patients, thanking the foundation for its help. Their words filled me with joy. And then the spinning began again. The lines blurred. This time it was far worse. The right side of my body was completely paralyzed. My speech vanished entirely. The doctors fought for my life for 3 days. Diego never left my bedside. Angela kept vigil with him. Alejandro consulted the best neurologists. They did everything possible and more. When the critical period passed, it became clear I would remain severely disabled, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to care for myself. I would exist, not live. But Diego and Angela did not give up. They hired the best specialists, arranged treatments, gave me massages. My son read me books, told me the news of the foundation. Angela sang the songs I had loved in my youth. "Dad," Diego whispered, holding my hand, "hang on. We need you. Your grandson needs you. He asks about you every single day." I couldn't answer, but I understood every word. And most importantly, I felt love. True selfless love from the son I had almost lost because of my own mistakes in raising him. The doctors said I didn't have long to live. A few weeks, maybe months. My body was worn out, and the second stroke had been too severe. Diego took indefinite leave from work. He spent whole days with me. He told me about the foundation's plans, about my grandson, about life. I listened, unable to answer, but in my soul I rejoiced at every word. "You know, Dad," he said, "I've understood the most important thing. It's not money, not career, not success. What matters are relationships, love for your family, the desire to help others." Angela came after work. She sat by my side, held my hand in hers. "Don Ramon," she whispered, "don't worry about us. We'll do everything right. We'll use your money for good deeds. We'll help thousands of old people live with dignity." I couldn't speak, but with my eyes I tried to tell her, "I believe you. I believe my money will serve good." Little Ramonito also came to visit his grandfather. The boy didn't understand what was happening, but he felt that Grandpa was unwell. He brought drawings, toys, sat quietly by my side playing. "Grandpa," he lisped, "when will you get better?" Diego explained to his son that Grandpa was very tired and needed rest. The boy nodded solemnly as if he understood. I spent my last days surrounded by those dearest to me: Diego, Angela, Alejandro, and my little grandson. Those who had become my family not by blood, but by spirit. "Dad," Diego said on the last day, "forgive me for everything, for leaving you when you needed help, for thinking only about money, for almost losing the most precious thing, your love." I couldn't answer in words, but the tears in my eyes said it all. I forgave him. I had forgiven him long ago, and I rejoiced that I had lived to see what a good man my son had become. "We'll continue your work," Angela promised. "The Wise Years Foundation will become the best charitable organization in the country. We'll help the elderly not out of pity, but out of love and respect." I died quietly in my sleep, surrounded by care and love, with those beside me who had made my last years happy. Ramon Alvarez Moreno died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by care and love. Beside him were those who had made his last years happy. The funeral was exactly as he had wished, not grand or pompous, but warm and sincere. The clinic staff came, patients who could still walk, colleagues of Diego and Angela from their charity work. Diego gave a speech about what kind of father and man Don Ramon had been. He did not idealize, he did not hide his father's mistakes, but he spoke with love and gratitude. "My father taught me the greatest lesson of life," he said. "He taught not with words, but with his own example. He showed me that true wealth is not in money, but in good deeds, that love must be earned every single day." After the funeral, the will was carried out exactly as the deceased had intended. Angela received 20 million pesos, Diego 10 million. Both spent the money exactly as they had promised their dying father. The Wise Years Foundation became one of the most effective charitable organizations in the country. In the 5 years after Don Ramon's death, it helped tens of thousands of elderly people. Angela opened 3 modern medical centers for low-income pensioners. Treatment there was free, and the attitude toward patients was as warm as hers had always been. Diego created a network of social centers where lonely seniors could find companionship, help, and support. He personally oversaw each center and knew many of the residents by name. Quiet Harbor was truly transformed into a model institution. The old building was demolished, a new one built, modern and comfortable. The staff was entirely retrained to work compassionately with the elderly. Now, this is a place where one would not be ashamed to bring their parents, Diego said at the opening of the new nursing home. Angela had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They named them Ramon and Esperanza, in honor of the old man who had changed their lives and his late wife. The children grew up in an atmosphere of kindness and care for others. Diego, too, changed as a family man. He divorced Valentina. They realized they weren't meant for each other, but he raised his son properly. The boy grew up kind and compassionate, understanding from childhood the importance of helping others. Little Ramonito often visited his grandfather's grave. He brought flowers, told him about his life. His father explained what kind of man his grandfather had been, what he had taught through his example. "Grandpa taught us the most important thing," Diego told his son. "He taught us to love people and to help those who need it." 10 years passed. The Wise Years Foundation became known throughout the country. Angela and Diego received state awards for their charitable work, but their greatest reward was the gratitude of those they had helped. At the cemetery, a modest monument was erected with the inscription, "Ramon Alvarez Moreno, the man who taught us to value what matters most in life, love and kindness." And beside the grave, they planted a mango tree. Every spring it blossomed, a reminder that the good sown by a man continues to live on after his death. The story of Don Ramon ended, but his life's work lived on. In every elderly person helped by the foundation, in every smile of a patient in a free clinic, in every kind act of those who understood. True wealth is not in the bank, but in the heart. And most important of all, his son became a man, a real man. That was worth more than any fortune.